Offseason mode for the San Francisco 49ers. We're looking at team needs on the offensive side of the ball, what to do at quarterback, backup quarterback specifically, and wide receiver, tight end. Big time needs there, potentially even more than we thought going into the offseason. And what about the offensive line? A lot to get into on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Coach Crocky. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love our everydayers. Thanks for hanging with us. Thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And lots to talk about today because we're talking about the offensive side of the ball. Team needs, what needs addressing most in the 2026 offseason for the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to go position by position here, and then we're going to try to rank these. And some of these positions might feel like they're at critical mass in the offseason. Must address some of these positions you might feel really good about as it goes into the offseason. Quarterback, I think, is where we have to start, Croc. And this one really all comes down to backup quarterback. You got a highly paid starter. Everyone likes Brock Purdy. He's good. He's not going anywhere. The 49ers drafted a 7th rounder in Curtis Rourke last year. I think, they had a chance to watch him for a month in practice after he came off IR because he tore his ACL during his college career. That made him sort of have a redshirt year as a rookie for the San Francisco 49ers. But Brock Purdy was a 7th round pick, and I liked Curtis Rourke quite a bit, but you can't really project him to be any more.
Hold on. You can't downplay. Oh, I like Cody Rourke quite a bit. Like, that was a guy who you identified during the season that year that, and this Indiana quarterback, he is a Kyle Shanahan guy. And you actually mocked him to the 49ers, and then they ended up drafting him. So that's a little bit more than just like,
Curtis Rourke is my guy now, and he's kind of like my new son. It used to be Richie James, and now it's Curtis Rourke because I identified him so early, and he was my greatest mock draft achievement, having identified him in the fall last year as a Kyle Shanahan guy. He reminded me a lot of, say, like a Kirk Cousins. And he was like, man, this is anticipation, throws with he plays with a lot of things that I think Kyle Shanahan likes. Toughness, played on an ACL. He tore his ACL early in the season, played through his entire college season last year with a torn ACL, got Indiana into the tournament. And now we found out, Indiana is like a powerhouse program now all of a sudden. By the way, does it diminish Curtis Rourke's achievements and in some ways diminish Fernando Mendoza's achievements? Because they got into the tournament with a different quarterback last year. It wasn't like Mendoza's been here elevating this program the whole time. They brought him in after they were already suddenly a tournament team. Should we think less of those quarterback prospects because of the system they have in place under Curt Cignetti now in Indiana as a football powerhouse?
Well, I think the main thing is that the quarterbacks are executing. So it's one thing to have a good system and feel comfortable with the things that you want to do, but to have the quarterback be able to execute at a level to where back-to-back years you go to the college football playoffs, I think that is an awesome vote of confidence to the coaching staff, but also to those quarterbacks too.
So Curtis Rourke, and I think Curtis Rourke could have been like a 4th round pick last year. And I think a lot of teams would have liked him, but he was going to have the redshirt year. He had an ACL, and I think that pushed him down in the draft where the 49ers could take him in round 7. And so, and I think it was a nice pick. But you can't project him any more than a number 3 quarterback, at least right now. He could, at this time next year, we're like, awesome backup quarterback, Curtis Rourke. He's everything you could have hoped for. And the 49ers would have a 7th rounder backing up a 7th rounder. But it all comes down to Mac Jones this offseason, Croc, because it's zero need, essentially. You bring in an undrafted free agent to, be a camp arm. If you keep Mac Jones, Brock Purdy, Curtis Rourke, unless there's an injury before now and, the start of the season or now in the draft or now in free agency or whatever. So the question becomes, you trade Mac Jones and that creates a new hole, but then you have picks to address other positions that we're going to talk about that are more pressing. So again, what do you think the odds are that the 49ers trade Mac Jones? Do you think this is going to be a need where the 49ers end up bringing in another player who is a veteran backup for Brock Purdy and trade away Mac Jones?
Is it really a hole if it's a backup player? Like, I feel like right now, like 49ers probably need a left guard. Like, that's a hole, right?
People are acting like you can't trade Mac Jones for a third-round pick because backup quarterback's that valuable. If you're spending a third round, if it's a third-round pick value for 1 year of a player, then it's a hole.
Well, I think that I want a second because I saw how valuable he was, not in the sense of just being a backup, but like, bro, he's winning football games with the replacements. So if he's doing that, like, all right, how much do y'all value this?
That's
how much do you value
costs for a starter is what you're trying to say. You're getting a starting quarterback. That costs something. You better pay up.
Yeah, that costs something. Yeah. You got to give up a second.
Yeah, okay. I like it.
So, yeah, in my opinion, I think that there's a decent possibility. A lot of teams are going to try to find every option to not have to trade for a guy like him. But I'm all about kind of what's proven, right? Especially when it comes to the quarterback position, even if you view him as a bridge quarterback. And if that's the case, yeah, he's got to go be a bridge quarterback, second round pick, maybe a 3-year kind of deal that they can eventually kind of get out of if need be while they potentially develop someone else, or he kind of does something. Well, I don't want to compare him being a backup to Sam Darnold being a backup, because Sam Darnold was just always better than Mac. Like, he's just a better prospect, more physically gifted, and then it just clicked. And if it clicked for him to be able to play at the level that he's capable of playing at, that's just going to be better than Mac Jones, right? But there's still a chance that Mac Jones goes and plays very well and is a starter around the league in the NFL. So in the event of that happening, I'm going to need something good. But because I want a second, I do think that lessens the possibility of me trading him, because I won't just give him away for a 4th-round pick or a 5th-round pick. So I don't want to say 50-50. I feel like that's a cop-out. But I'd say I think there's a 40% chance someone says, all right, we'll cough up a late 2nd-round pick or maybe 2 3rd-round picks for Mac Jones. In that event, I'll take it. And Cody Rourke, likely your new backup quarterback, or potentially, like you said, a veteran that you can bring in. You kind of know what he is. He knows what it means to be a backup quarterback, and he helps your starter, Brock.
I think not being a good quarterback class is helpful to what Mac Jones' value will be. And also, I think Sam Darnold, I don't think they're the same quarterback, but I think Sam Darnold doing what he's done this year does help the value of Mac Jones to be like, look, maybe not quite as physically gifted as Sam Darnold, but things got weird in a bad situation. You go hang out with Kyle Shanahan for a year and look what that can give you. And you could potentially be one of the top 32 and top 25 starting quarterbacks in the NFL potentially the next season. And it's going to be valuable to a team. And so I think Sam, and I think the bad quarterback draft class, maybe only 1 first-round potential guy and at most 2 first-round potential quarterbacks. And then again, if you're a team that you have to talk yourself in, and we saw this happen already with the Steelers and Kenny Pickett, they're going to do that again with Ty Simpson out of Alabama, where they say, well, I'd rather trade one of our 3 third-round picks and maybe something else for Mac Jones than spend another first-round pick on a maybe guy who's not any more physically gifted than Mac Jones. And Mac Jones is already ready to go. Fit nice in Mike McCarthy's system.
Hindsight, right? But would the Vikings rather have Sam Darnold right now and maybe drafted a sweet defensive player?
Oh, yeah.
At the number 3 overall pick? Or
the timing worked out horribly for the Vikings, because if they could have just, I think they would have liked, because they didn't get to see Sam Darnold. They'd already drafted J.J. McCarthy. If they had already done the year with Sam Darnold, then they wouldn't have drafted J.J. McCarthy.
Well, no, but they signed Sam Darnold before they drafted him. Now again, you don't know what version you're going to get, but man, they did sign him before they drafted.
But you hadn't seen Sam. He was thought of as just a stopgap and let's see what we got type of a guy, because he still didn't play very much for the 49ers. So
basically what I'm saying, Mac Jones would be to a team.
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly. Just a couple names real quick. Free agent market at quarterback, if the 49ers need a veteran backup if they trade away Mac Jones. Jimmy Garoppolo, age 34. Little reunite Brock and Kyle and Jimmy G. You got Trey Lance as well, who's a free agent, oddly enough. Josh Johnson on the list. A lot of former 49ers there. Here are the names that are a little more interesting potentially. What about Zach Wilson? And Zach Wilson, I think, was recently quoted as saying he basically wants Like Zach Wilson's the type, his agent might call the 49ers before the 49ers would call him, be like, please, I want to be in this Kyle Shanahan rehabilitation program. And so Zach Wilson's an interesting name. Marcus Mariota is out there as a free agent. Tyrod Taylor, Kenny Pickett, another one. Mitch Trubisky, Case Keenum, and Malik Willis is a big one because he's going to probably get a nice little payday, and teams will probably want to go Malik Willis first before Mac Jones because they don't have to give up a draft pick. But once Malik Willis is gone, Mac Jones becomes the best option available for a team that doesn't have a quarterback that doesn't want to draft for him.
I like the thoughts of Zach Wilson when you have Cody Rourke. Because Rourke is the quarterback where, he fits what we like to do. Wilson is a guy, good upside, and we'll see.
Next, let's talk pass catchers. We've got tight ends, wide receivers, and offensive line clearly a need for the 49ers. Will they see it the same way, though, Croc? Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and get tickets locked in within minutes. Love seeing the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout, which I hate when I'm buying any kind of tickets, not only NBA games, football, baseball, concerts, views from your seat as well before you buy, so you make the decision easy. Know what it's going to look like before you get to the event, and great last-minute options too. NBA tickets showing up at really solid prices. I've got tons of half-ticket price concert tickets before. Love the Game Time app. If you ever want to go to a sporting event or a concert or a comedy show, you got to have Game Time ready to go. I always check Game Time before I buy any tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. You will find draft odds, though, as well on FanDuel throughout the offseason. This Super Bowl 60, a FanDuel special, making sure you're in the middle of all the action with the special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year, whether you're backing the favorite, riding the underdog, building one last same game parlay. This is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you are a new customer, just bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. If you win, make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We've already done a whole episode to start the offseason, Croc, about the wide receiver position. We know it's a need. How much of a need is it for the 49ers? Because you have Ricky Piersoll hopefully coming back healthy. We saw what a healthy Ricky Piersoll could be for 4 games to start the year before he got banged up. You got Juwan Jennings, who is a free agent. Even with Juwan Jennings potentially coming back, I think the 49ers would need that player. And I think it's where you kind of run into some problems if you are the 49ers, and we're projecting what the 49ers could be next year, right? And you're projecting all these needs for the San Francisco 49ers. And it feels like all of their needs are big ones rather than just depth. There's some positions where, I need a little depth here and there. But I feel like, quarterback is kind of a backup. It's a depth need. But wide receiver, you need a wide receiver 1. Tight end, you have a tight end 1, but if Kittle came back at 90% for half the year, you would take that right now based on an Achilles injury late in the year, right? So you kind of need a dude at tight end for at least part of the year. And what's a 33-year-old George Kittle post Achilles going to look like the rest of his career? So do you need a Robin to his Batman at the very least going forward? And then on the offensive line, okay, they maybe some depth, but God, you need a starter at left guard. They don't have a starter at left guard going into the offseason. You might need 2 starting offensive tackles by 2027, and you got to get that development started early. And that's a dude. An offensive tackle is a dude. So you need dudes there. On the defensive side of the ball, you start talking about pass rushers, defensive linemen. Those are dudes. You start talking about safety. They've got depth of safety. They need a dude at safety potentially. We'll talk defense a little bit more tomorrow. But I feel like wide receiver is one of those positions where it's like, okay, depth, sure. Draft a guy in the 3rd round, but they need a wide receiver 1. They need a dude. So a lot of their needs are like more dude than depth, I think. And that's where I'm at with wide receiver, which is why it's near the top of the list for the biggest needs. And if you don't bring back Juwan Jennings with, depending on what money he's going to get in the free agent market, you need dudes and depth at wide receiver.
It's really weird with the 49ers in the wide receiver 1 spot, because it's almost like they need a dude, like a receiver that has wide receiver 1 ability. So it's like, hey, when we want to start targeting you, we just want you to have the ability of a wide receiver 1, but don't be a wide receiver 1, because that's going to demand a lot of money, a lot of resources. So I know that's very odd, but I just don't think the way we've seen the 49ers, again, I talked about the Ayuk year, and people, 1,350 yards, like that wide receiver 1. See, they used him 37th in the NFL in targets. Like, that's wild to have that kind of production off of that few targets. And that's what Kyle Shanahan ideally wants. Some people out here, not so much about Andre Johnson, but they bring up Julio Jones a lot.
Yeah.
And with Julio Jones, 200 targets one year? Like the first year Kyle was there, an astronomical amount of targets. The next year, that dropped way down. And you know what the difference was? One year, they were bad, missed the playoffs. The next year, they were a Super Bowl team and should have won, right? So when he had the most success with Julio, he had, and this is off the top of my dome, 88 catches. You guys can fact check that. I know that around those, along the lines of that, it wasn't this 120, 130 reception type of season. So that tells you Kyle wants a guy with that kind of ability, but I want to use you when I want to use you, as opposed to having to use you, like what you're seeing with CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, those guys who are getting a higher volume of targets.
So right now, going through this, I'm going to put wide receiver as the number 1 need for the San Francisco 49ers, because I think they could attack it potentially in the draft and via trade or via free agency. If you had to guess, which way do you think the 49ers go after a wide receiver? And can they find a wide receiver who has some wide receiver 1 traits that can create on his own, that can give you yak and make some plays down the field and potentially be a target hog in certain games when Kyle Shanahan wants to dial up that number? Does it feel like it's asking a lot?
It is asking a lot for a guy who may not be that. So I'd say you kind of ride things out with Ricky Piersoll and hope he shows a little bit more stability with being able to stay on the field. And then you kind of throw some other guys out there alongside of him. Maybe I wouldn't even say a younger guy, but just a proven veteran receiver that's not going to be top of the market type of money, but has a little bit of dynamic ability, a little bit of juice to him. Again, he could have been a wide receiver 3 on the team, but I think on the 49ers, they'll be able to find a way to make it to where he's productive.
I think they go big fish hunting in the trade market at wide receiver. That's what I think. A.J. Brown.
AJ's a weird one because he's on the sideline reading books if he's not involved. So
at least he's on the sideline.
At least he's on the sideline.
Closer to the football field, closer than Brandon Ayuk got to the football field this year. That's for sure. Right now, wide receiver need number 1 for the San Francisco 49ers. Yak bro. Gotta find a yak bro too, if nothing else.
Yeah.
That could be a 2nd round player, right? That could be a 3rd round player. Debo was a 2nd round guy.
Yeah. Gotta help Brock Purdy.
Yeah, gotta help out Brock Purdy. How about this? Daniel Jeremiah, in his mock draft on Monday, had the 49ers at pick 27 in the 1st round, selecting Oregon tight end Kenyan Sadiq. Are you familiar with Kenyan Sadiq's game? I've watched a little Kenyan Sadiq, and to be honest with you, I think most 49ers fans, when they first saw that, were like, "Oh no, I don't like that." I kind of like it because I think he can pair with George Kittle. I think he can be a player that replaces some of Juwan Jennings' snaps as a big slot move around guy maybe even play some fullback snaps. He's got some run after catch ability. He's super athletic. He's built like a huge running dude is built. He actually reminds me of Vernon Davis, the way he's built, like just ripped, right? And thick of the ankles and but he can run. Not a technician as a route runner, but as an athlete, he's there. And is he someone that could be an OW for the 49ers and play enough roles even with George Kittle and then potentially replacing George Kittle for a lot of snaps while he's out and then maybe even beyond George Kittle when he's no longer a San Francisco 49er if you're looking into down the road, a few years. So I don't think that's actually insane, Croc. But again, I think that would probably have to be a really special player.
Yeah, I do like Sadiq, though. He's a baller.
Yeah, he's a baller. Absolutely.
Looks running back, too. He's pretty built.
He's built.
He looks the part. He's built.
Yeah, it reminds me of Vernon Davis, the way he's built. I'm interested to see how he runs. I don't think I ever saw him run a route. That worries me a little bit. Like, is he going to, get in Kyle Shanahan's system and not run the routes right? Because he's just like everything's crossers or catch the ball and run at Oregon. So that remains to be seen, but supreme athlete and very interesting selection for the 49ers. Kind of knock out wide receiver / tight end, hedge your bets a little bit. It would be fun to see how Kyle Shanahan could use someone like Kenyan Sadiq. Running back is easy for me. It is you draft the day 3 running back every year. That's the need from now until the end of time. Running back. Yep. Offensive line next, Croc, and this is a big conversation. Let's go through some of. And by the way, wide receiver, we didn't go through everybody at the position. You can go listen to our podcast last week. We talked about the 49ers and talked about some options that were out there at the wide receiver position. Offensive line. This is a big one, Croc. Is it a bigger need than wide receiver or any other need potentially in the offseason? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. Prize Picks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections, no drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. Prize Picks is incredibly easy to get started. You pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on those stat projections on the Prize Picks app. It makes watching games way more engaging, especially during the playoffs and the big game. And everybody wants to be involved in the big game, right? And maybe my favorite feature is the early payouts, which lets you cash in if a player gets off to a hot start, if you want to, or maybe you want to ride it out with that player. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Okay, offensive line. Trent Williams said he's coming back for at least another year. So 38 years old, Trent Williams, still one of the better offensive linemen in the NFL, even if he's not quite in his prime years at this point in his career. You got Austin Pleasance backing him up. We saw some nice snaps from him and did a really nice job for someone that we didn't really know a lot about. And you kind of held your breath when Trent Williams went out. Can Austin Pleasance hang on? And he did hang on, and he provided some depth. So it's nice to see the 49ers do have at least a little bit of depth at offensive tackle, bringing Austin Pleasance back to compete for sure. And then Colton McKivitz, who was going into the last year, if I'm not mistaken, of his contract. He's signed that short-term extension with the 49ers before last year. I think it was a 2-year deal. So potentially, if Trent Williams retires, Colton McKivitz would be a free agent, and the 49ers need to develop themselves an offensive tackle. So offensive tackle is a really sneaky need, Croc, for the 49ers, because unless you want to go into the offseason 12 months from now and be like, oh my God, this is DEFCON 5, and you have to have at least one starting offensive tackle, that might be a pretty difficult situation. It'd be really nice if the 49ers had a guy developed that could jump in and potentially start at left tackle or right tackle as needed, and of course add some depth. But they also have a hole at left guard potentially with Spencer Burford being a free agent. They could bring back Spencer Burford. I think he was solid at left guard, but I wouldn't mind seeing some upgrades at left guard or potentially center for the San Francisco 49ers. Those are really the 2 spots in the short term. And ideally, Croc, can you find me a guy, if we're playing matchmaker, can you find me a first-round prospect who could start at left guard for a year or 2 and be developed next to Trent Williams before kicking out and being a starting left tackle in the NFL? That would be ideal.
We've been identifying offensive linemen that had that kind of ability for the 49ers, and they just never go for those guys, and they end up drafting guys just typically a little bit later. I think Spencer Burford is a very interesting one. Obviously, just a little up and down, or kind of more either down or kind of even type of play you're getting from him on a consistent basis. But the thing I do like, a lot of his starting experience, has played a lot of games for the 49ers. And he's a guy that, if I'm the Niners, I bring back to be kind of a swing tackle / guard type guy. And I can see him being your seventh offensive lineman on your team. I don't think anybody would have too much of an issue with that. I think just having somebody who understands what you need, has the athleticism, and can play in a pinch if need be, I'm fine with him. But the biggest holes, clearly center, guard. They have to figure out a way to fix that. And then, like you said, down the line, you start looking at the big picture. You got to figure out a way to attack left tackle. Unfortunately for the 49ers, as banged up as they are, they won a lot of football games. So they still picked super late. And you got to try to figure out, all right, who's going to be there that's my type of guy. And that's what the 49ers continue to get into. When they pick, there are guys that we may like, and the 49ers are like, don't quite fit exactly what we're looking for. So I just see the 49ers trading up.
In the draft, what happens is these offensive linemen get pushed up. So there might be an offensive lineman like, ooh, this guy could be a late first round pick and he might look good. Remember when I think it was Dane Brugler in his first mock draft last year had who was it? Armand Membo going to the 49ers. And then all of a sudden Armand Membo was being the number 7 pick in the draft. And so I think the offensive lineman you really like at this point, you're like, oh man, this guy at 27 be perfect. And all of a sudden that guy goes 15. You're like, okay, well, the league loves offensive linemen, right? And so can you find that player at 27? It starts to get a little bit difficult when you start talking about sometimes wide receivers and definitely like true blue offensive tackles. We might see a run on those guys in this draft. Pooney's fine, right guard. He didn't have the best year. He didn't ascend from where he was as a rookie after a really nice rookie year, but he had the PCL injury in camp. I think that really, kind of hurt him all year long. And then obviously at center, you've got Jake Brendel as the starter. I think he can be upgraded. The 49ers love him. He's been a great story, undrafted guy, and become a starter. I think it's time to upgrade the center position for sure. If you can find that player, you got Connor Colby, the 7th rounder last year at guard, to potentially battle with whoever you bring in at left guard as well. Ben Barch is on IR. You got to stop the injured guys. Ben Barch hasn't been able to stay healthy in his career, so I don't think he's a factor. Matt Hennessy and then Drake Nugent as well, backing up center. If they didn't like those guys to start over Jake Brendel, then we should probably not be getting excited about those guys.
Yeah, Weston Richburg, is that the last time the 49ers really threw some big resources at the center position?
Well, yeah, because they brought in Mack and Richburg. So center was a position where I don't think you should scoff at the idea that Kyle Shanahan would say, oh, let's go spend, this is the time to spend on Tyler Linderbaum in the offseason, go get a top center, because he's tried to have big time centers before. So center is a big one. Offensive tackle is a big one. Guard is a big one, but you could maybe do tackle guard combo, center guard combo with a player that starts at guard and goes in the other direction in subsequent seasons. So offensive line is a pretty big need. Now the question becomes, Croc, is offensive line a bigger need than wide receiver as we rank out these offseason needs for the San Francisco 49ers?
I think offensive line in general, when you have a quarterback that you're paying, with what you're paying Brock Purdy, that's just the biggest need, regardless. Like whatever you have to do but whether it's guard, whether it's tackle, I don't think that part matters. I think most people would say, oh, no, you got to get a tackle. I think for the 49ers, you'll still have Trent Williams next year.
Yeah.
So tackle is not the biggest need. It will be, but I don't think it is in the immediate future.
Would you be okay going into 2027 with a rookie tackle? Be like, all right, here you go, week 1, have fun. That's why I think it's a big need now, as big as it is, because it's going to be such a big need. It'd be really nice to develop that player, and you have the opportunity to do it. That time is running out. This is it. This is offseason, the only time you have to get in front of an offensive line needed tackle, and you still have the current need at offensive line. And by the way, the 49ers had a bad run game for the first time in Kyle Shanahan or Mike Shanahan's history as coaches. Help that out by an offensive line. Like either Christian McCaffrey's washed or the 49ers need to be better running the football because of scheme. Probably not scheme. So Offensive line, right? Yeah. I think it's offensive line 1, wide receiver 2, Croc.
Yeah. I think you always got to start with O-line.
Yeah. All right. O-line 1, wide receiver 2. The 49ers will not see it that way, but that's okay. Let us know what you think. We're going to talk defense tomorrow. Team needs. We'll find out if Robert Saleh is stealing any coaches away from the San Francisco 49ers. And hit us up with your questions, comments, and topics about the 49ers offseason at BD Peacock, at Coach Crocky. In the YouTube comments, subscribe while you're there. Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.